The morning mist clung to the river Dart like a sailor's prayer, refusing to let go of the water that had carried countless naval dreams to sea. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood at the window of her quarters at Britannia Royal Naval College, watching the sun struggle through the fog. Today was different. Today, His Majesty King Charles III would arrive to lead the Lord High Admiral's division, an honor that came once in a generation. Sarah had been at Dartmouth for 3 years now, training the next generation of naval officers. She had seen young cadets arrive with stars in their eyes and leave with salt in their veins. But nothing had prepared her for the electric atmosphere that now charged through the college's historic corridors. The weight of tradition, already heavy within these walls, had doubled overnight. Down in the main courtyard, Cadet James Henderson was polishing his boots for the 4th time that morning. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold Devon air, but from the magnitude of what lay ahead. James came from a long line of naval officers. His grandfather had served under Admiral Lord Mountbatten, his father had commanded a destroyer in the Falklands, and now James carried the family torch. The pressure was immense, but today felt like destiny calling his name. "Henderson, if you polish those boots anymore, you'll wear through the leather," called out Cadet Emma Thompson, his closest friend at the college. Emma came from a completely different background. Her father was a school teacher, her mother a nurse. She had fought tooth and nail for her place at Dartmouth, driven by a childhood fascination with ships and the sea. Where James carried the weight of expectation, Emma carried the fire of determination. The two had formed an unlikely friendship during their first week at the college. James, overwhelmed by the legacy he was expected to uphold, had found comfort in Emma's straightforward approach to life. Emma, sometimes feeling out of place among the privileged backgrounds of many cadets, had found inspiration in James's genuine kindness and lack of pretension. "I can't help it," James admitted, setting down his cloth. "My hands won't stay still. When will we ever get another chance like this? The King himself, leading our division. My father called last night, he's never sounded so proud, and I haven't even done anything yet." Emma sat beside him on the bench outside their accommodation block. The college buzzed with activity around them. Senior officers moved with purposeful strides, their faces masks of professional composure. Maintenance staff hurried about with last-minute preparations, ensuring every brass fitting gleamed and every piece of bunting hung perfectly straight. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Emma said, watching a group of younger cadets practice their drill movements. "My gran used to tell me stories about the war, about watching the ships leave from Portsmouth. She said you could feel the history in moments like those, like all the generations of sailors were standing right there with you." Chief Petty Officer Williams approached their bench with his characteristic measured pace. Williams had been at Dartmouth longer than anyone could remember. He had trained princes and paupers, future admirals and future politicians. His weathered face had seen every type of cadet the college could produce, but his eyes still held the spark of someone who genuinely believed in the transformative power of naval training. "Right then, you two," Williams said, his voice carrying the authority of decades at sea. "Stop looking like you're about to face a firing squad. Today's about honor, tradition, and service. You've earned your place here through merit and dedication. The King isn't coming to judge you, he's coming to celebrate what you represent." Williams had served on HMS Britannia during some of the most challenging naval operations of recent decades. He had seen young officers face their first real crisis, watched them grow from uncertain cadets into confident leaders. He understood the nervous energy that now filled the college because he remembered feeling it himself, decades ago, when he first stood before royalty during a fleet review. "Tell us about the last time a monarch led a division here, Chief," James asked, grateful for any distraction from his nerves. Williams smiled, his eyes distant with memory. "That would be Her Late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, back in 1998. Different times then, but the same feelings you're experiencing now. I was a young petty officer, absolutely terrified I'd trip over my own feet during the ceremony." He chuckled. "Funny thing is, afterward, all I could remember was how normal she seemed, how genuinely interested she was in each of us as individuals." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching helicopters. The distinctive thrum of rotor blades echoed across the college grounds, sending a visible wave of excitement through everyone present. This was it, the moment they had all been preparing for was finally arriving. Sarah Mitchell emerged from the main building, now dressed in her finest uniform, every ribbon and decoration in perfect position. As one of the senior instructors, she would be part of the welcoming committee. She had met members of the royal family before during various naval functions, but never in circumstances quite like these. Leading the Lord High Admiral's division was not just ceremony, it was a demonstration of the deep connection between the Crown and the Royal Navy. The helicopters landed on the college's parade ground, their downdraft disturbing the perfectly raked gravel and sending small clouds of dust into the air. Security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, creating clear pathways and ensuring everything proceeded according to the meticulously planned protocol. King Charles III emerged from the lead helicopter, his naval uniform immaculate, his bearing every inch the former naval officer he had once been. Behind him came his retinue of staff and security, but the king's attention was immediately focused on the college itself, his eyes taking in the grand architecture and the assembled cadets with genuine interest. Admiral Sir Jonathan Moresby, the college commandant, stepped forward to greet His Majesty. Moresby had commanded the college for 2 years, bringing both operational experience and academic distinction to the role. He understood the delicate balance between maintaining naval traditions and preparing officers for modern maritime challenges. Your Majesty, welcome to Britannia Royal Naval College, Admiral Moresby said, his voice carrying clearly across the parade ground. We are deeply honored by your presence and your commitment to leading the Lord High Admiral's division. The King's response was warm and immediate. Admiral Moresby, the honor is entirely mine. There is nowhere I would rather be today than here, among these remarkable young people who represent the future of our Royal Navy. As the formal greetings continued, Emma found herself studying the King's face. She had expected to see the distant formality of royal protocol, but, instead, she saw genuine engagement and what appeared to be anticipation. This wasn't duty reluctantly performed, this was someone who genuinely wanted to be here. The welcoming ceremony proceeded with military precision, but, underneath the formal protocol, there were countless small, human moments. A cadet nearly dropped his rifle during the inspection but recovered with such grace that the King offered a subtle nod of approval. A young midshipwoman answered a question about her studies with such enthusiasm that the King spent several extra minutes discussing her research into maritime environmental protection. Sarah Mitchell watched these interactions with professional interest and personal pride. This was why she loved her role at Dartmouth, witnessing the moment when young people realized they were part of something much larger than themselves. The King's presence amplified this feeling exponentially. As the initial ceremonies concluded and the group moved toward the college's historic buildings, Chief Petty Officer Williams fell into step beside Emma and James. "See," he said quietly. "Not so terrifying after all. Now comes the real work, showing His Majesty what you're truly capable of." The real test would come during the division exercises, where the King would take direct command of a mixed group of cadets and staff in a series of naval simulations. These weren't just ceremonial displays but genuine training exercises designed to test decision-making, communication, and leadership under pressure. Emma felt her nervousness transform into excitement. This was what she had trained for, the opportunity to demonstrate that her working-class background and unconventional path to Dartmouth had prepared her just as well as any traditional naval family upbringing. She thought of her parents, probably glued to the television back home, watching for any glimpse of their daughter in the coverage. James, meanwhile, felt the weight of generations of family service crystallizing into this single moment. His great-grandfather had served in the Battle of Jutland, his grandfather at D-Day, his father in the South Atlantic. Now it was his turn to represent the family honor, but, more importantly, to prove worthy of the trust placed in him by his instructors and fellow cadets. The King paused at the entrance to the college's main building, turning back to look at the assembled cadets. For a moment, the formal distance of monarchy dissolved, and he was simply a former naval officer looking at the next generation of maritime leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard, "today we don't just honor tradition, we create it. Each of you carries the hopes and dreams of those who came before, and the responsibility to prepare for challenges we cannot yet imagine. It is my privilege to serve alongside you, even if only for these few precious hours. As they entered the college, Sarah Mitchell reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her own path to Dartmouth had been unconventional, a grammar school girl from Manchester who had discovered her calling during a university sailing trip. She had faced skepticism and occasional prejudice but had persevered through sheer determination and the support of mentors who recognized her potential. Now, as a senior instructor, she was responsible for shaping the next generation of naval leaders. The weight of that responsibility had never felt more real than it did today, with the king himself about to demonstrate the kind of leadership she tried to instill in her cadets every day. The college's great hall buzzed with quiet conversation as everyone assembled for the briefing that would outline the day's exercises. The king moved among the cadets with easy confidence, asking questions about their studies, their ambitions, their understanding of modern naval challenges. Emma found herself in conversation with His Majesty about her research into sustainable maritime operations. To her surprise, the king was remarkably well informed about environmental challenges facing modern navies and asked probing questions that demonstrated genuine understanding and interest. The future of naval operations will require us to balance operational effectiveness with environmental responsibility, the king observed. It's encouraging to see your generation grappling with these complex challenges from the beginning of your careers. James, when his turn came, found himself discussing the evolution of naval tradition and its relevance to contemporary service. The king listened thoughtfully as James explained his perspective on honoring the past while adapting to future needs. Tradition without evolution becomes mere ritual, the king noted. Evolution without tradition loses its soul. Finding that balance is perhaps the greatest challenge facing any institution with a long history of service. As the briefing began, Admiral Moresby outlined the day's exercises with characteristic precision. The Lord High Admiral's division would participate in a series of simulated naval operations, ranging from humanitarian assistance to tactical maneuvering. The king would take direct command, with cadets and staff serving in various roles throughout the chain of command. The atmosphere in the hall was electric with anticipation. This wasn't just another training exercise, this was a chance to experience naval leadership at its highest level, to understand how strategic thinking translated into tactical action, to see how the qualities they were developing at Dartmouth would serve them throughout their careers. Chief Petty Officer Williams caught Emma's eye and offered an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. He had seen countless exercises over the years, but even he could feel that today was special. The presence of the king elevated everything, transforming routine training into something approaching sacred duty. As the briefing concluded and everyone prepared to move to their assigned positions, Sarah Mitchell felt a surge of pride in her institution and her profession. Dartmouth had been preparing naval officers for over a century, adapting its methods while maintaining its core mission. Today, that mission would be demonstrated at its finest level. The king stood and surveyed the assembled group one final time before they dispersed to begin the exercises. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "let us show the world what the Royal Navy represents: excellence, dedication, courage, and service above self. I can think of no finer way to spend this day than in your company, learning from your expertise and contributing what I can to your development." As everyone moved toward their positions, Emma and James exchanged a look of mutual understanding. Whatever happened during the exercises, they were part of something historic, something that would live in their memories and in the annals of the college forever. The morning mist had finally lifted from the River Dart, revealing the full beauty of the Devon countryside that surrounded the college. The sun now shone brightly on the water, as if nature itself was acknowledging the significance of the day. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn sounded, perhaps a fishing vessel heading out for the day's work, or a pleasure craft taking advantage of the clearing weather. But, for the cadets and staff of Britannia Royal Naval College, there was only one sound that mattered now: the call to stations that would begin the most memorable training exercise of their careers. The king was ready to lead, and they were ready to follow, wherever the day's adventures might take them. The command center of Britannia Royal Naval College hummed with controlled intensity as the Lord High Admiral's division exercise commenced. King Charles III stood at the central command table, his experienced eyes scanning the tactical displays that showed the simulated maritime environment where the day's scenarios would unfold. Around him, cadets and instructors took their positions at various stations, each knowing that every decision, every communication, and every response would be observed by someone who had himself commanded ships and understood the weight of naval responsibility. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell found herself assigned as the King's operations officer, a role that required her to translate strategic intentions into tactical orders. She had held similar positions during real operations, but never under such scrutiny, never with such personal significance. As she reviewed the first scenario briefing, she could feel the weight of expectation from every cadet in the room, all of whom looked to her as an example of what their own careers might achieve. The first exercise began with a humanitarian crisis simulation. A fictional earthquake had struck a remote island nation, and the Royal Navy was tasked with coordinating international relief efforts. The King studied the scenario parameters carefully, then began issuing his initial assessment to the assembled team. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face a situation that requires us to balance speed with coordination, urgency with safety," His Majesty began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced real crises during his own naval service. "Our primary mission is to save lives, but we must do so in a manner that doesn't compromise our own safety or that of other relief vessels." Cadet Emma Thompson had been assigned to the communications station, where her role was to maintain contact with various fictional relief agencies and coordinate their activities. She had trained extensively for such scenarios, but the presence of the King added layers of complexity she had never experienced. Every transmission she made was being evaluated not just for technical correctness, but for the kind of leadership potential that Dartmouth aimed to develop. "Communications, I need you to establish contact with the International Relief Coordinator and get me an assessment of current conditions at the disaster site," the King commanded. Emma's training kicked in immediately. "Yes, Your Majesty." "International Relief Coordination Center, this is HMS Dartmouth, requesting immediate situational update for Operation Neptune's aid, over." The response came through clearly on the speakers, delivered by instructors playing various roles in the simulation. "HMS Dartmouth, this is Relief Coordination. Current conditions include severe weather, damaged harbor facilities, and approximately 3,000 displaced civilians requiring immediate evacuation. Recommend caution on approach due to debris in shipping channels." The King nodded approvingly at Emma's professional handling of the communication, then turned to address the broader tactical picture. "Very well. We need to establish a safe approach corridor while simultaneously preparing to receive civilian evacuees. This requires precise coordination between multiple vessels and agencies." Cadet James Henderson had been assigned to the Logistics Coordination Station, where his responsibility was to ensure that relief supplies reached their intended destinations efficiently. The role suited his methodical nature and his understanding of the complex systems that keep naval operations functioning smoothly. "Logistics, what's our current inventory of medical supplies and emergency provisions?" the King inquired. James consulted his displays quickly. "Your Majesty, we have sufficient medical supplies for approximately 500 casualties, emergency food for 2,000 civilians for 72 hours, and fresh water purification equipment capable of supporting 1,000 people daily." "And our helicopter capacity for evacuation operations?" "We have 4 search and rescue helicopters available, each capable of carrying 12 evacuees per sortie, with an estimated turnaround time of 45 minutes per flight." The King considered this information carefully, then addressed the entire command team. "We need to prioritize our evacuations. Medical casualties first, then families with young children, then elderly civilians. Logistics, I want you to coordinate with the medical team to establish a triage system that can be implemented as soon as we establish helicopter operations." Chief Petty Officer Williams, observing from his position as exercise coordinator, noted the King's natural command presence and the way the cadets responded to his leadership. This was exactly the kind of learning experience that made exercises at Dartmouth so valuable, seeing theoretical knowledge applied by someone with genuine command experience. As the humanitarian scenario continued, unexpected complications arose. A second earthquake struck the fictional island, damaging the temporary landing area that had been prepared for helicopter operations. The King had to quickly reassess the situation and develop alternative approaches. "Communications, I need immediate contact with our helicopter crews." They are to abort current landing attempts and establish a holding pattern at a safe distance until we can identify alternative landing sites. Emma's hands moved efficiently across her control panel. All helicopter flights, this is Dartmouth Control. Execute immediate abort of landing sequence and establish holding pattern at grid reference 345 to 789. Await further instructions. The response was immediate. Dartmouth Control, helicopter flights acknowledge abort sequence. Establishing holding pattern as directed. Request instructions for alternative approach routes. Sarah Mitchell watched the King's decision-making process with professional admiration. His ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances while maintaining focus on the primary mission reminded her why naval officers spent so much time training for crisis management. Real emergencies rarely proceeded according to plan, and the ability to think clearly under pressure was what separated effective leaders from merely competent ones. Operations, I need alternative landing options, the King directed to Sarah. What assets do we have that could establish a temporary helipad on the island? Sarah consulted her tactical displays. Your Majesty, we have engineering capabilities aboard HMS Pioneer, including portable landing platform equipment. Estimated deployment time is 90 minutes, but this would provide a secure landing facility capable of supporting continuous operations. Make it happen. And I want a backup option prepared in case the engineering solution encounters problems. The exercise continued with increasing complexity as additional challenges were introduced. A medical emergency aboard one of the relief vessels required immediate attention, while simultaneously, reports came in of potential security threats from armed groups taking advantage of the post-earthquake chaos. The King's command decisions throughout these complications demonstrated the kind of integrated thinking that naval officers needed to develop. He balanced humanitarian concerns with security requirements, operational efficiency with safety protocols, and immediate needs with longer-term strategic objectives. Cadet Emma Thompson found herself deeply impressed by the King's communication style. Unlike some commanders she had observed during training exercises, His Majesty never seemed rushed or flustered, even when multiple crises demanded simultaneous attention. His questions were precise and focused, his orders clear and unambiguous. During a brief lull in the action, the King took the opportunity to engage directly with the cadets about their decision-making processes. He approached Emma's communication station and asked, "What factors are you considering when prioritizing which messages to relay immediately versus those that can wait for the next scheduled communication window?" Emma felt momentarily nervous but drew on her training to provide a thoughtful response. "Your Majesty, I prioritize based on immediate safety implications, then operational effectiveness, then administrative efficiency. Life-threatening situations always receive immediate attention, followed by information that affects current tactical decisions. And how do you handle situations where multiple messages arrive simultaneously, all claiming urgent priority?" "I evaluate based on the source's position in the command structure and their direct knowledge of the situation, sir. A ship's captain reporting immediate danger takes precedence over shore-based administrative requests." The King nodded approvingly. Sound reasoning. The ability to make these quick assessments under pressure is exactly what separates effective communicators from merely technically competent ones. Similar exchanges occurred throughout the command center as His Majesty took the opportunity to engage with each cadet about their specific responsibilities and decision-making processes. "Intelligence, what do we know about the approaching forces?" he inquired of the cadet assigned to that station. "Your Majesty, radar contacts indicate 3 vessels of unknown classification approaching from the northeast at approximately 25 knots. Estimated time to contact is 47 minutes. They have not responded to standard identification requests." "Very well. Communications, I want you to transmit a clear warning that they are approaching a humanitarian operation zone and must identify themselves immediately. Operations, begin preparations for defensive positioning of our relief vessels." Sarah Mitchell immediately began coordinating the complex task of repositioning civilian relief ships while maintaining their humanitarian mission capabilities. This required precise timing and clear communication to ensure that defensive preparations didn't interfere with ongoing rescue operations. "All relief vessels, this is Dartmouth Command. Implement defensive positioning protocol Delta 7 while maintaining current evacuation operations. Military escorts will provide protective coverage. The king observed the coordination efforts with careful attention to detail. Operations: I want our most vulnerable vessels positioned behind the protective screen first. Hospital ships and those carrying evacuated civilians take priority. As the defensive preparations continued, the exercise controllers introduced additional complications designed to test command decision-making under extreme pressure. Equipment failures, communication problems, and conflicting intelligence reports all demanded immediate attention while the potential threat continued to approach. Emma found her communication skills tested to their limits as she managed multiple simultaneous conversations with various vessels, coordinate rescue operations, and relay intelligence updates to the command staff. The king's presence added pressure, but also inspiration. Seeing someone handle complex command decisions with such composure gave her confidence in her own abilities. The approaching vessels finally responded to identification requests, revealing themselves to be naval forces from a neutral nation also responding to the humanitarian crisis. The tension in the command center was palpable as everyone waited for the king's assessment of this new development. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this presents us with both an opportunity and a challenge, His Majesty observed. Additional resources could accelerate our relief efforts, but coordinating with unknown forces requires careful diplomatic and operational planning. He turned to address the entire command team. I want recommendations from each station on how to integrate these new arrivals into our ongoing operations. Consider both the benefits and the risks, and be prepared to defend your assessments. This exercise in collaborative decision-making allowed the cadets to demonstrate not just their technical skills, but their ability to think strategically and consider multiple perspectives simultaneously. The king listened carefully to each recommendation, asking probing questions that required the cadets to think beyond their immediate responsibilities. As the exercise progressed toward its conclusion, the successful integration of the additional naval forces allowed for a significant acceleration of the relief efforts. The final scenario phase involved a coordinated evacuation of the remaining civilian population as weather conditions deteriorated and the window for safe helicopter operations began to close. The king's final commands of the exercise demonstrated the kind of confident leadership that comes only from genuine experience. His ability to balance competing priorities, maintain clear communication under pressure, and inspire confidence in his subordinates provided the cadets with a masterclass in naval command. All stations, this is command. Commence final phase evacuation operations. I want every civilian off that island within the next 2 hours. Weather window is closing, but I have complete confidence in this team's ability to complete the mission safely and efficiently. As the exercise concluded and the simulation systems powered down, the king turned to address the assembled cadets and staff. The relief in the room was palpable, but so was the pride in having successfully completed such a complex scenario under royal command. Ladies and gentlemen, today you have demonstrated exactly why Britannia Royal Naval College continues to produce the finest naval officers in the world, His Majesty said. Your professionalism, adaptability, and commitment to service have been exemplary. Chief Petty Officer Williams stepped forward to coordinate the post-exercise debriefing, but not before catching Emma's and James's eyes and offering a subtle nod of approval. The morning's exercises had exceeded everyone's expectations, but the day was far from over. Additional scenarios awaited, each designed to test different aspects of naval leadership and operational capability. As the cadets prepared for the next phase of training, Sarah Mitchell reflected on what she had observed. The king's command style had been instructive not just for the cadets, but for her own development as a senior officer. His ability to maintain focus on core objectives while adapting to changing circumstances reminded her why continuous learning was so essential in naval service. The success of the morning's exercises had set a high standard for the remainder of the day, but everyone in the command center knew they were capable of meeting that standard. The king had demonstrated confidence in their abilities, and now it was time to justify that confidence in even more challenging scenarios. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parade ground as the Lord High Admiral's division prepared for the second major exercise of the day. The success of the morning's humanitarian crisis simulation had boosted confidence throughout the college, but everyone understood that the afternoon would present an entirely different set of challenges. This scenario would test their ability to conduct complex naval operations while managing international diplomatic considerations, a reflection of the modern reality where naval officers must be both warriors and diplomats. King Charles III stood in the college's strategic planning room, studying intelligence briefings for the new scenario. Around him, the command structure had been reorganized to give different cadets the opportunity to serve in various leadership roles. Emma Thompson now found herself assigned as the Tactical Operations Coordinator, while James Henderson had been promoted to serve as the King's aide-de-camp, responsible for managing the flow of information to the command staff. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell had been assigned to role-play as the commanding officer of an Allied naval force, which would require her to interact with the King's command from an external perspective. This arrangement would test the cadets' ability to coordinate with multiple command structures while maintaining clear lines of authority and communication. The new scenario involved a complex situation in international waters where commercial shipping had been disrupted by suspected piracy activities. Intelligence reports suggested that several merchant vessels had been seized, with their crews held hostage while their cargoes were stolen. The situation was complicated by the fact that the incidents were occurring near the territorial waters of a nation that was politically unstable and, potentially sympathetic to the pirates. Chief Petty Officer Williams had taken on the role of exercise coordinator for this scenario, which meant he would be introducing complications and challenges designed to test the command team's ability to adapt to changing circumstances. His experience with real-world operations made him particularly skilled at creating realistic scenarios that reflected the kind of complex challenges modern naval officers actually faced. Your Majesty, James Henderson began, presenting the initial intelligence briefing. We have confirmed reports of 3 merchant vessels seized in the past 48 hours. The vessels include a container ship with automotive cargo, a bulk carrier transporting grain, and a chemical tanker. Total crew complement across all 3 vessels is 47 personnel. The King studied the tactical charts carefully, his finger tracing the locations where the incidents had occurred. What do we know about the pirates' capabilities and their base of operations? Emma, consulting her intelligence displays, responded promptly. Intelligence suggests they're using fast attack craft launched from hidden bases along the coastline. They appear to have sophisticated communication equipment and detailed knowledge of shipping schedules, suggesting possible inside information from port authorities or shipping companies. And the political situation with the coastal nation? Sarah Mitchell, speaking from her role as Allied Force Commander, provided the diplomatic context. The government claims they lack the naval resources to patrol their territorial waters effectively. However, there are suspicions that some officials may be receiving financial benefits from allowing the pirates to operate from their coastline. The King considered this information carefully before beginning to outline his strategic approach. We have multiple objectives that we must balance carefully. Our primary mission is to rescue the hostages and recover the stolen vessels. However, we must do this while maintaining international law, preserving diplomatic relationships, and avoiding any actions that could be interpreted as violations of national sovereignty. The complexity of the scenario immediately became apparent as the exercise controllers began introducing additional complications. Reports came in of suspicious activity around several other merchant vessels in the area, suggesting that additional attacks might be imminent. Simultaneously, diplomatic messages arrived from various nations demanding immediate action to protect their flagged vessels. Communications, I need you to establish contact with all merchant vessels currently in the area, the King commanded. They need to be advised of the current threat level and provided with recommendations for defensive routing. Emma immediately began transmitting warnings and safety advisories, but quickly encountered the kind of real-world complications that made naval operations so challenging. Some merchant vessels were not maintaining proper radio watch, others were operating with minimal crews that made rapid course changes difficult, and several were carrying cargoes that made them particularly attractive targets for pirates. Your Majesty, I'm having difficulty reaching the merchant vessel Baltic Star, Emma reported. Their last known position was within 20 nautical miles of the most recent piracy incident, but they haven't responded to radio calls for the past 6 hours. James quickly consulted the shipping databases. Baltic Star is a Liberian-flagged vessel carrying electronic components from South Korea to European ports. crew of 12. If she's been seized, that would bring the total number of hostages to 59. The king's expression grew more serious as the scope of the crisis expanded. Very well. We need to modify our operational planning to account for a possible fourth vessel. Operations, I want search patterns established to locate Baltic Star while we continue planning rescue operations for the confirmed seizures. Chief Petty Officer Williams, monitoring the exercise from his coordinator position, introduced another complication designed to test the team's ability to handle multiple simultaneous challenges. Reports came in of a severe storm system developing in the area, which would significantly impact both rescue operations and the ability to maintain surveillance of suspected pirate bases. The weather complication forced the king to make difficult decisions about resource allocation and timing. Helicopter operations would become increasingly dangerous as the storm approached, but waiting for better weather might result in the pirates relocating their hostages or even executing them if they felt cornered. Meteorology, give me your best assessment of the weather window, His Majesty requested from the cadet assigned to weather analysis. Your Majesty, current forecasts show deteriorating conditions beginning in approximately 4 hours. Wind speeds will increase to 35 knots with wave heights reaching 12 feet. Helicopter operations will become extremely hazardous after 1800 hours. Sarah Mitchell, continuing in her role as Allied Force Commander, introduced additional complexity by requesting coordination for a parallel rescue operation being planned by her fictional command. This required the King's team to balance their own operational planning with the need to coordinate with friendly forces who had their own capabilities and limitations. Dartmouth Command, this is Allied Task Force 7, Sarah transmitted. We have submarine assets that could potentially provide reconnaissance of suspected pirate bases, but we would need coordinate with your surface operations to avoid any conflicts. The King immediately recognized the value of additional intelligence capabilities, but also understood the coordination challenges this would create. Allied Task Force 7, we welcome your reconnaissance capabilities. Please coordinate directly with my operations staff to establish clear communication protocols and operational boundaries. Emma found herself managing an increasingly complex web of communications as more players entered the scenario. In addition to coordinating between the King's command and the Allied forces, she was now also managing communications with various civilian authorities, international shipping organizations, and diplomatic representatives from nations whose vessels had been attacked. The pressure was intense, but Emma discovered that her training had prepared her well for exactly this type of multifaceted challenge. Her ability to prioritize communications, maintain clear records of all transmissions, and ensure that critical information reached decision-makers quickly proved invaluable as the scenario complexity continued to increase. James, serving as the King's aide-de-camp, found himself responsible for synthesizing information from multiple sources and presenting it to His Majesty in a format that supported rapid decision-making. This required him to understand not just the tactical details of the situation, but also the broader strategic implications of various courses of action. Your Majesty, James reported, intelligence now confirms that the pirates are using a mobile base of operations, possibly a modified cargo vessel that allows them to remain in international waters while launching their attacks. This complicates rescue operations because the hostages may not be held in fixed locations. The King nodded grimly at this development. A mobile base makes direct assault much more challenging, but it also means they're vulnerable to detection by our surveillance assets. Operations, I want all available reconnaissance focused on identifying and tracking this mobile base. As the afternoon progressed, the scenario continued to evolve in ways that tested every aspect of naval command and control. Political pressure mounted as diplomatic representatives demanded immediate action, while operational constraints limited the available options for rescue attempts. The weather window continued to narrow, forcing difficult decisions about acceptable risk levels for rescue operations. The King demonstrated throughout these challenges the kind of leadership that comes only from genuine command experience. He remained calm under pressure, asked pertinent questions that revealed critical information, and made decisions quickly when action was required while taking time for careful consideration when circumstances permitted. The situation is becoming increasingly complex, His Majesty observed during a brief tactical pause, but our fundamental objectives remain clear. We must rescue the hostages, neutralize the pirate threat, and do so in a manner that maintains international law and preserves our diplomatic relationships. Chief Petty Officer Williams introduced a new complication designed to test the team's crisis management abilities. Intelligence reports suggested that one of the seized vessels was carrying a cargo of hazardous chemicals that could pose environmental threats if mishandled during rescue operations. This added an entirely new dimension to operational planning. Your Majesty, Emma reported, we've received updated manifest information for the chemical tanker Nordwind. She's carrying 1,500 tons of industrial solvents that could cause severe environmental damage if released into the ocean. The environmental threat required immediate consultation with specialized experts and careful coordination with environmental protection agencies. The King's team had to balance the urgency of hostage rescue with the need to prevent potential ecological disaster. This changes our operational parameters significantly, the King acknowledged. We need specialist teams prepared for hazardous materials recovery, and all rescue operations must account for the possibility of chemical contamination. Sarah Mitchell, observing from her Allied Force role, noted how effectively the King integrated new information into his operational planning. Rather than becoming overwhelmed by the increasing complexity, His Majesty continued to maintain focus on core objectives while adapting tactics to address new challenges. As the weather window continued to narrow, the King made the difficult decision to commence rescue operations despite less than ideal conditions. The risk to hostages from continued captivity was judged to outweigh the increased operational risks from deteriorating weather. All units, this is Dartmouth Command. Commence Operation Neptune's rescue immediately. Weather window is limited, but we cannot afford to delay further. All rescue teams are authorized to proceed with enhanced safety protocols due to environmental conditions. The final phase of the exercise tested the team's ability to coordinate complex operations under extreme time pressure. Rescue helicopters launched into increasingly difficult weather conditions while surface vessels moved to intercept the suspected pirate base vessel. Emma managed communications between multiple rescue teams while James coordinated intelligence updates and logistics support. The King's command decisions during this phase demonstrated the kind of integrated thinking that separates exceptional naval officers from merely competent ones. He balanced multiple competing priorities while maintaining focus on the primary mission of hostage rescue. As rescue operations commenced, the exercise controllers introduced final complications designed to test adaptability under pressure. Equipment failures, communication problems, and unexpected resistance from the pirates all required immediate tactical adjustments. Rescue Team Alpha reports mechanical problems with their primary helicopter, Emma announced. They're returning to ship for emergency repairs. Rescue Team Beta is proceeding alone to the primary target. Very well, the King responded immediately. Redirect Rescue Team Charlie from their secondary objective to provide backup for Team Beta. I want redundancy in our rescue capabilities. The successful conclusion of the rescue operations required precise coordination between multiple teams operating in challenging conditions. The King's leadership throughout the crisis demonstrated the kind of calm competence that inspired confidence in subordinates while maintaining focus on mission accomplishment. As the exercise reached its conclusion and the simulation systems began powering down, everyone in the command center felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The afternoon's scenario had been more complex than anything most of the cadets had previously experienced, but they had performed exceptionally well under royal command. Ladies and gentlemen, the King addressed the assembled team. Today you have demonstrated that you are ready to handle the kind of complex, multifaceted challenges that characterize modern naval operations. Your professionalism and adaptability have been exemplary. The afternoon's success had been built on the foundation of the morning's exercises, with each cadet building confidence and experience that prepared them for increasingly demanding challenges. As they prepared for the final phase of the day's training, everyone understood that they had participated in something truly exceptional. The evening light painted the Devon Hills in shades of gold and amber as the Lord High Admiral's division prepared for their final exercise of this extraordinary day. The college's main hall buzzed with quiet anticipation as cadets, instructors, and staff gathered for what would be the most challenging and personal scenario yet. King Charles III had requested that this final exercise focus not on tactical operations or crisis management, but on leadership development and the human elements of naval service that often determine success or failure in real-world situations. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell found herself back in her instructor role, observing rather than participating as the King took direct responsibility for mentoring the cadets through scenarios designed to test their understanding of naval values, ethical decision-making, and the personal qualities that distinguished great naval officers from merely technically competent ones. The evening's format would be different from the morning and afternoon exercises. Rather than large-scale operational scenarios, the cadets would work through smaller, more personal challenges that revealed character and tested their understanding of the principles that guided naval service. Each exercise would be followed by discussion and reflection, allowing His Majesty to share insights from his own naval experience and encouraging the cadets to think deeply about their developing professional identity. Emma Thompson and James Henderson had been selected to lead the first scenario, working together to resolve a fictional situation involving crew morale and disciplinary challenges aboard a deployed naval vessel. The scenario was designed to test their understanding of leadership responsibilities and their ability to balance competing demands of fairness, operational effectiveness, and crew welfare. Chief Petty Officer Williams introduced the scenario with characteristic attention to detail. You are the senior midshipman aboard HMS Endeavour, deployed on a 6-month patrol mission. Recent events have created tension among the crew, and the commanding officer has tasked you with investigating the situation and recommending solutions. The fictional situation involved allegations of favoritism in duty assignments, concerns about unequal treatment of crew members from different backgrounds, and growing resentment between various departments aboard the ship. These were exactly the kind of human resource challenges that young officers would face throughout their careers, but which couldn't be resolved through technical knowledge or tactical expertise alone. Emma and James studied the scenario briefings carefully, noting the complex web of personal relationships, competing interests, and institutional constraints that characterized the fictional situation. The King observed their analysis process, occasionally asking questions that encouraged them to consider perspectives they might have missed. What factors do you consider most important when evaluating allegations of unfair treatment? His Majesty asked Emma. I think we need to distinguish between perception and reality, while also recognizing that perceptions can become reality if they're not addressed properly, Emma responded thoughtfully. Even if the allegations aren't factually accurate, the fact that crew members believe they're being treated unfairly will affect their performance and unit cohesion. The King nodded approvingly. Precisely. Naval leadership often requires us to address not just the factual aspects of a situation, but also the emotional and psychological factors that influence how people interpret events. James was asked to consider the commanding officer's position in the scenario. How do you balance the need to investigate allegations thoroughly with the requirement to maintain operational readiness and crew confidence in the leadership structure? It's a delicate balance, Your Majesty, James replied. We need to take all allegations seriously and investigate them fairly, but we also can't allow the investigation process to undermine the authority structure that's essential for ship operations. Transparency and clear communication become critical. As the scenario progressed, additional complications were introduced that tested the cadets' ability to handle sensitive personnel situations. These included cultural misunderstandings between crew members from different backgrounds, allegations of harassment that required careful investigation, and the challenge of maintaining morale during long deployments away from family and friends. The King's guidance throughout these discussions revealed his deep understanding of the human side of military service. He shared insights from his own experience about the importance of listening to crew concerns, the challenge of maintaining fairness while preserving discipline, and the ways that small personnel problems could escalate into major morale crises if not handled properly. One of the most important lessons I learned during my own naval service, His Majesty observed, is that technical competence is necessary but not sufficient for effective leadership. The ability to understand and motivate people, to build trust and maintain morale, is often what determines whether a unit succeeds or fails in challenging circumstances. Sarah Mitchell watched these interactions with professional fascination. The King's approach to mentoring was remarkable in its combination of personal warmth and professional insight. He clearly cared deeply about developing these young officers not just as technical experts, but as leaders who understood their responsibilities to the people they would command. The second scenario of the evening focused on ethical decision-making in ambiguous situations. The cadets were presented with a fictional situation where military orders conflicted with humanitarian concerns, requiring them to think carefully about their professional obligations and personal values. The scenario involved a naval vessel ordered to enforce shipping restrictions in an area where humanitarian supplies were desperately needed by civilian populations. The legal authority for the restrictions was clear, but the humanitarian consequences of enforcement were potentially severe. The cadets had to work through the ethical implications while also considering their professional duties as naval officers. Different cadets were assigned to argue various perspectives on the situation, forcing them to think through the complexities from multiple viewpoints. Some represented the position that orders must be followed regardless of personal feelings, while others argued for the importance of considering humanitarian implications in operational decision-making. The king facilitated these discussions with remarkable skill, asking probing questions that encouraged deeper thinking while never imposing his own views on the cadets. He clearly wanted them to develop their own ethical frameworks rather than simply accepting prescribed solutions. Ethics in naval service, His Majesty observed, rarely involves clear choices between right and wrong. More often, we face situations where multiple valid principles come into conflict, and we must make decisions based on our best understanding of our duties and our values. Emma found herself arguing for the importance of considering humanitarian factors in operational decision-making. I understand that military orders must be followed, but I also believe we have a responsibility to consider the broader implications of our actions. If we can find ways to accomplish our mission while minimizing humanitarian harm, don't we have an obligation to pursue those alternatives? James took a more traditionalist position, emphasizing the importance of clear command authority and the dangers of allowing individual officers to modify their orders based on personal judgments. The chain of command exists for important reasons. If every officer feels free to interpret orders based on their personal values, we risk undermining the entire structure of military discipline. The king encouraged both perspectives while pushing each cadet to consider the strongest arguments against their positions. This approach helped everyone understand the complexity of ethical decision-making in military contexts and the importance of thoughtful deliberation when facing difficult choices. Chief Petty Officer Williams introduced additional complications to the ethical scenario, including pressure from superior officers to ignore humanitarian concerns, media attention that could affect public support for military operations, and conflicting information about the actual effectiveness of the enforcement mission. These additional factors tested the cadets' ability to maintain their ethical reasoning under pressure and to consider the broader context within which military decisions were made. The king's guidance helped them understand how external pressures could influence decision-making and the importance of maintaining clear principles even in challenging circumstances. The third scenario of the evening focused on personal resilience and the psychological challenges of naval service. The cadets were asked to consider situations involving stress, isolation, family separation, and the personal costs of military commitment. This scenario was particularly personal because it addressed challenges that every naval officer would face throughout their career. The fictional situation involved a young officer dealing with family crisis while deployed on a critical mission. The officer's spouse was facing a medical emergency, children were struggling with the parent's absence, and the officer was torn between professional duty and family responsibilities. The scenario required the cadets to think about how naval officers balance competing loyalties and find ways to maintain personal well-being while meeting professional obligations. Emma drew on her own background to contribute insights about the challenges faced by officers whose families weren't part of traditional military communities. Her parents had struggled to understand her career choice, and she had experienced firsthand the difficulty of maintaining civilian relationships while pursuing military service. I think one of the biggest challenges, Emma observed, is helping family members understand that military service isn't just a job, it's a calling that requires sacrifices from everyone connected to the service member. But we also have to be honest about those costs and work actively to maintain those relationships. James spoke about the family legacy of naval service and how it had both helped and complicated his own journey. Having a family tradition of naval service provides understanding and support, but it also creates pressure to live up to expectations. Sometimes I worry more about disappointing my family's naval heritage than about my own career development. The king listened to these personal reflections with evident empathy, sharing his own insights about balancing public duty with family responsibilities. His perspective as someone who had navigated both naval service and royal obligations provided unique insights into the challenges of managing competing demands. The reality of naval service, His Majesty observed, is that it requires not just personal sacrifice, but sacrifice from those who love and support us. Recognizing this responsibility is important, and finding ways to honor both our professional duties and our personal relationships requires constant attention and creativity. As the evening progressed, the scenarios became increasingly personal and reflective. The final exercise asked each cadet to consider their own motivations for naval service and to articulate their understanding of the values and principles that would guide their careers. This exercise required deep personal reflection rather than tactical analysis or problem-solving skills. Each cadet was asked to speak directly to the king about their own journey to Dartmouth, their aspirations for naval service, and their understanding of the responsibilities they were preparing to accept. Emma spoke movingly about her childhood fascination with ships and the sea, her determination to prove that naval excellence could come from any background, and her commitment to using her position to inspire other young people from working-class families to consider military service. "I want to show that the Royal Navy is truly open to anyone with the dedication and ability to serve," she said. "My background is different from many of my classmates, but I believe that diversity of experience strengthens our service. I hope to command ships someday, but I also want to be someone that young people like myself can look to as an example." James reflected on the weight of family tradition and his evolving understanding of what it meant to serve honorably. "I've learned that honoring my family's naval heritage isn't about simply following in their footsteps, but about bringing my own strengths and perspectives to naval service. I want to be worthy of the tradition while also contributing something uniquely my own." Other cadets shared similar reflections, creating a powerful atmosphere of shared commitment and mutual support. The king listened to each personal statement with evident interest and respect, offering encouragement and insights drawn from his own experience of balancing tradition with innovation. Chief Petty Officer Williams observed these exchanges with visible emotion. In his decades at Dartmouth, he had seen many exceptional groups of cadets, but the combination of royal presence and genuine personal reflection had created something truly special. As the evening exercises drew to their conclusion, the king addressed the assembled group with remarks that would be remembered long after this extraordinary day had ended. "Today has been a privilege for me in ways that you may not fully appreciate," His Majesty began. "I have had the opportunity to witness the future of our Royal Navy in action, and I am profoundly impressed by what I have seen. Your technical competence is evident, but, more importantly, your character, your commitment to service above self, and your understanding of the responsibilities you are accepting give me great confidence in the future of our naval service." He paused, looking around the room at each cadet and instructor. "Naval service has changed dramatically since I wore the uniform, and it will continue to evolve throughout your careers. But the fundamental qualities that make great naval officers, courage, integrity, compassion, and commitment to something larger than ourselves, these remain constant." Sarah Mitchell felt tears forming as she listened to the king's words. This had been more than a training exercise, it had been a profound affirmation of the values and traditions that made naval service meaningful. "Each of you carries forward a tradition that extends back centuries," the king continued, "but you also carry the responsibility to adapt that tradition to meet future challenges. You are not just preserving the past, you are creating the future." As the formal exercises concluded, the atmosphere remained charged with emotion and purpose. Cadets and instructors alike understood that they had participated in something truly exceptional, something that would influence their understanding of naval service for the rest of their careers. Emma and James found themselves standing together in the evening air outside the college's main building, looking out over the River Dart where the lights of ships twinkled in the distance. Both felt profoundly changed by the day's experiences. "I keep thinking about what the king said about creating the future," Emma mused. "It's exciting and terrifying at the same time." "I know what you mean," James replied. "I came here thinking about honoring tradition, but now I realize that real honor comes from making the tradition relevant to new challenges." Chief Petty Officer Williams approached them, his weathered face showing uncharacteristic emotion. "40 years I've been at this college," he said quietly, "and I've never seen anything quite like today. You two should be proud of how you represented yourselves and your fellow cadets." As the evening wound down and preparations began for the King's departure, everyone involved understood that this day would become part of the college's legend. Future cadets would hear stories about the day King Charles III led the Lord High Admiral's division, and those stories would inspire new generations of naval officers. The King's final words to the assembled group captured the significance of what had been accomplished. "Today we have not just honored tradition, we have renewed it. You carry forward the best of our naval heritage while preparing to meet challenges we cannot yet imagine. It has been my honor to serve with you, however, briefly." As His Majesty's helicopter lifted off from the college grounds, carrying him back to his royal duties, the lights of Dartmouth continued to shine across the water. Inside the college, the cadets who had participated in this extraordinary day prepared for the remainder of their training, forever changed by their experience of royal leadership and their deeper understanding of what naval service truly meant. The day had begun with nervous anticipation and formal ceremony. It ended with profound personal transformation and a renewed commitment to the values that made naval service not just a career, but a calling. The young officers who would graduate from Dartmouth in the months and years to come would carry with them not just technical knowledge and tactical expertise, but the memory of a day when tradition and innovation came together under royal leadership to create something truly exceptional. Years later, when these cadets had become senior officers themselves, they would tell their own subordinates about the day they served under King Charles III at Britannia Royal Naval College. They would speak of technical lessons learned and operational insights gained, but mostly they would remember the human moments, the personal connections, the shared commitment to service, and the profound understanding that naval leadership is ultimately about people serving together in pursuit of something larger than themselves. The legacy of this extraordinary day would live on in the careers and character of everyone who participated, a lasting reminder that the greatest traditions are not preserved in museums but renewed through the dedication and service of each new generation.